What's up, everybody? So here I am checking in with y'all. It's been a little bit since I last put a video out, but so I wanted to continue part two of my last video that I put. So yeah, man, I was talking about prison, man, and how I process, catching a life sentence, and how that was for me. And I explained to you guys how it was during the beginning process, and so forth. Um, so yeah, man, once I caught my life sentence and I got to prison and everything, I explained what my feelings were, and like I said, man, in my last video, I finished off by saying, I don't care who you are, right? Um, but everybody in prison, when you're a lifer, you suffer, but we learn to suffer in silence because, like I said, we wear our game mask. When you go out to the yard, it's your game mask. You know what I mean? When you're in the cell with your cellie, it's your game mask. Like when you're talking to the CEOs, it's your game mask. You don't really like having people read you, or what you might be going through. We all know that we suffer and that some of us might go through depression, and everybody in prison, we all have problems. We just learn to deal with our problems in silence. And not just that, but for some reason in prison, we're taught that, to show our emotions, it's a weakness. And you're always going to have somebody there trying to exploit that weakness. And plus, you don't want to be seen as soft or whatever. But the truth of the matter is, like I said, I don't care how hard you are, everybody suffers in silence. The thing is that we just all wear our game mask. And I'm just keeping it real, man. We ain't meant to steal and shit. You know what I mean? We're human beings. And, going through a journey as a lifer, that's hard. And you might not think that it's hard if you ain't never been in those situations. You got to be in those shoes to know what I'm talking about. Because, like I said, being a lifer, it's not easy. So getting to prison, as a lifer, I remember when I first got there and, we were locked down. We had been on like an 8-month lockdown. The homies had got off on the hootahs, and it had been a long lockdown. I think we had got off a lockdown for like 2 weeks and went back on lockdown for like another 6-7 months. And it just had been like that. Back then, you would go on lockdowns for long stretches of time. You could be on a yard for 3-4 years, and you only get to experience a totality of maybe 2 months of yard, just because there was so much lockdowns, and they would be months and months and months at a time. And once you would get off a lockdown, you'd be off a lockdown for like 2 weeks, a month, and then boom, right back, another 6 months. And sometimes, whether it was back then, when I got to Calipatria. In Calipatria, we had a thing going on with the Juras. The Juras on Sea Yard, they had shot a homie. As you know, correctional officers, they're trained to carry Mini 14s. And they're trained to carry less than lethal force as well, which are block guns and stuff, pepper spray, block guns, batons and stuff like that. But then you got these guard towers where these COs are in a higher, more secure location, and they monitor the yard. And when shit happens or there's any type of violence, they're trained to use these real live Mini 14s, real rifles, real live rounds, and they could kill you. So what happened was, there was a homie from Florence, and one of the COs shot this homie. I don't remember if it was a riot or the homies rushed the Hudas or what exactly was the situation, because this happened on Sea Yard. So I wasn't on Sea Yard at that time. I had eventually got to Sea Yard, but at that time when this happened, I wasn't there. But I am aware and I do know that this Huda shot this homie from Florence in the leg. On the inner thigh part of the leg, there's a main artery, and it hit him there, and the homie bled to death. So when that happened, it was on with the Hudas. And on every yard, A yard, B yard, C yard, there was something going on with the Hudas. The homies were getting off on the Hudas and all kinds of stuff. So when I got there to Calipat, we had been on lockdown due to all these incidents that were going on with the Hudas. So yeah, that's what prison life was like for me in the beginning. And I remember like putting up and just thinking like, wow, like I'm here, like damn, this is home. Like, but then I'm thinking like, damn, this is it? Like, that's it? Like, I'm stuck in a cell, I go to chow. Well, I wasn't going to chow back then, I was locked down, but like, just thinking there was nothing to prison. Like, you know what I mean? There's, when I was young, I used to like glamorize, prison, and like my older homies that, had been to prison, and like, when I was striving to create that reputation for myself and be that guy, and wanting to be in prison one day just so I could have those brownie points, and I finally get to prison, and it's just like, man, like this is it. It was nothing. Just being stuck in a cell. There's no life, absolutely no life. And then when we did start getting off lockdowns, you get assigned either, school, some type of vocation, or you go to yard, So when you first arrive to prison and you're a lifer, you got to be on close custody, which is close A, for 5 years. So you can't go behind the wall where all the vocations are at anyways. So we used to be close A, A2B. We used to call them A2 bums, because for those 5 years, you're just gonna bum it out. You're not assigned pretty much nothing. Unless you get assigned school, if anything, but you're pretty much not getting nothing. You gotta do those first 5 years close custody. And so like I said, like majority of that time we were locked down. And when we did get off lockdown, it was just yard, when I would go to yard, I would play sports. I would work out. That's the way I occupied myself and dealt with my stress and, me adjusting to my new life in prison. I used to love playing handball. I could play pretty good. Basketball, I shoot that shit too. I even played soccer with the paisas. It's a trip though, because in prison, after a while, everything seems repetitive, man. Like, basketball starts getting boring. So you switch it up. And then it's handball, and then that gets boring, and you switch it up. And then it's soccer, and then that gets boring, and then it's pull-up bars, and so back and forth. But you're only limited with a certain amount of options, because after a while it becomes bored. And so in the prison cell, it's the same thing. Like, I would work out in the cell sometimes, do my burpees and stuff like that. So when I do go to yard, I could play my sports. But in the cell, I would also draw. I would also read. For me, the way I would do my program, I would have seasons. Like, one season I'm into drawing, and then I would burn out on drawing, and I would get into reading. And then I would burn out on reading, and I'll get into working out in the cell. And that would burn out. And then, so yeah, I would just sometimes have to get creative on the way I would do my program inside the cell. That's why when you're in prison, it's important that you have a good cellie, because a lot of the times, man, if you don't have a good cellie, your time in prison is gonna be pretty miserable. I mean, just imagine being stuck in a tiny little cell with a person you don't like. And in prison, you bump into a lot of dudes, man, with hang-ups and character defects and shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got dudes that are straight fucking J-cats and shit, you know what I mean? Or dudes that are idiots with no common sense, you know what I mean? You got dudes with bad habits. You got dudes that are cool as fuck, you know what I mean? You got a variety of type of people, you know what I mean? You got smart people, I mean, very intelligent, educated people. You got people that are crafty. You got people that are I mean, excel socially, like, I mean, good conversation skills. You got a little bit of everything, man. You got your artists and shit. You got your tattoo artists. Like me, I had a celly and shit named Green Eyes and stuff. You know, he used to tat. That was his hustle. Like, he was the best one in the building, you know what I mean? And, you know, me and him just so happened to land in the same cell together. And we hit it off pretty good, man. He ended up being a good celly and shit. And, you know what I mean? He tatted, you know what I mean? Nobody took care of him. But tattooing was his hustle. And, you know, with me, being that I was a celly, he hooked me up. So most of my work that I got from him. So, you know, I'm all tatted up. I mean, you know, I got all my chest, all my back, my arm and shit, you know what I mean? Yeah, man, it's been like 13, 14 years since I had tattoos. And even to this day, it's still pretty good work. So the dude was pretty good. So yeah, you know, having a celly, a good celly, it's important because it's gonna make your time, you know what I mean, go a lot more smoother, you know, versus you having a celly you don't get along with, who has fucked up mañas, character defects, and you know what I mean, sooner or later you're gonna bump heads, you know what I mean, and if you're not gonna be on the same page with them, you know, one thing eventually will lead to another. And I know because throughout the years, I had good cellies and I had bad cellies in prison. I had a few fights in the cell, and at one point, I heard one of my cellies. I almost killed my celly in Corcoran Shoe. So I lost my double cell privileges for 5 years. I caught a shoe term, and I was in Corcoran Shoe for a long time because of that. So yeah, I'll talk about that another time. So, but getting back to prison life, man, and processing having a life sentence, you know, prison, man, there's a lot of shit in prison that, you know, you get to experience. And, you know, there's a lot of violence and shit, you know what I mean? All the races are divided, you know what I mean? You got your blacks, you know, you got the Southsiders, you got the Paisas and the whites and the others. And prison is prison. We all have our politics and shit, you know what I mean? And, you know, you gotta abide by rules, man. And rules in prison are important because it establishes some type of order. And if there is no rules, just imagine people go buck wild when there's no rules. You know what I mean? You're dealing with people who are violent, aggressive. You know what I mean? Gang members. You know what I mean? If there ain't no rules to govern ourselves, then it's gonna be chaos. So rules are important, I think. You know, we govern ourselves in prison, not the Hura. We don't give a fuck what the Hura says. You know what I mean? Yeah, they got Title 15s, they got their own rules and regulations, but we don't go by their rules. We govern ourselves. And, you know, we have to be responsible with the way we conduct ourselves because we answer to one another. And my actions affect the next man. So that's why it's important that you govern your own behavior, you know, the way you carry yourself and the way you interact with other people and shit like that, you know what I mean? But not just that, you want to have dignity as a man, you know what I mean? You know, you want people to respect you, so that's why it's important, you know, how you interact with people and shit, how you carry yourself, you know what I mean? Be a man on your word and, you know, shit like that. But in prison, there's a lot of violence, man. Like, man, like I remember when I first pulled up and I seen my first stabbing and shit. Like, I remember being on the yard and, you know, the homie that I was playing handball with, he comes and he taps me and tells me, hey, the yard's about to go down right now. And yeah, like 2 minutes after he told me that, sure enough, by the weight pit, I just seen some commotion, like some scuffles, and I look and I see two dudes on top of this other dude just butchering them, boom, 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 hitting them. And yeah, you hear the gunshots go off the tower, which they always give the warning shot first before they let off the Mini 14. And I just remember being stuck, like, oh shit, like, you know what I mean? That's the first prison stabbing I've seen. Like, the shit's real, you know what I mean? And, you know, I was like, wow, like, you know what I mean? Kind of taken back, you know what I mean? Like, I just felt something like, damn, like, this is where I'm at, you know? So this is like the prison that everybody talks about, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, like I seen that and, you know, I try not to look because everybody says like, don't look, don't make it obvious, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to attract attention to a situation when, you know, the CEOs notice everybody looking a certain direction, you know what I mean? Then that's going to make them look. So, you know, you don't want them to look, you know what I mean? So I just peeked, you know what I mean? And I kept peeking, but I wasn't trying to make it obvious. So yeah, like, and it seemed like after that incident, there was a string of other stabbings and shit, you know what I mean? And so after a while, man, in prison, like, you start seeing all these stabbings. In the first 2-3 stabbings, it's like, fuck, it does something to you. Like, you feel something, like, you know what I mean? And you even think, like, damn, like, fuck, if I ever fuck up, like, damn, that could happen to me. You know what I mean? Like, fuck, I'm gonna have to make a piece and, I mean, carry a piece on me and shit, you know what I mean? Because I sure ain't gonna be a victim. So then you start getting in that mode and shit, you know what I mean? But yeah, like, after a while, man, like, you start seeing so much shit happen in prison that after a while, like, you don't get the same effect no more. Like, after a while, like, I became desensitized to the shit. Like, something could happen, like, right by me, and, you know, I just wouldn't be affected by it. Like, I would just keep on going about my business, you know? Like, I had come to learn to accept. That's when I came to learn to accept that prison was my home, and that was just part of my life now, you know what I mean? And I just wasn't affected no more. So I remember I got to go to AdSeg, man, for the first time, and, you know, it was a pretty big incident, man. We, you know, it was a 5-on-5, and I remember, you know, out of 10 people, 8 people had weapons. So just imagine, like, 5 people against 5 people. That means that 4 on one side and 4 on the other side got weapons. And so there was a whole lot of stabbing and slicing going on. So yeah, the shit cracked off on the yard, man. And, you know, I don't want to go into too many details and shit, but I got caught up in that little incident, and I went to the hole, man. That was my first time in AdSeg, and you know, it's a trip because when all that shit happened and it cracked off, man, like, my adrenaline was rushing, and I remember thinking, like, yeah, like, I'm making my bones here, you know what I mean? You know, at that time, like, I wanted to put in work. I wanted to earn my little stripes. You know, I had kind of been known already because I had grew up in the system, you know what I mean? I had been in juvenile hall, camp, placements. I went to CYA. When I went to the county for the first time, when I got washed up for this, I was in the gang module. I was in 1750 high power. So I was kind of known already. Like, I knew a lot of people, you know what I mean, from being in the system, you know what I mean, since I was young. And me doing my first little mission and my first little incident, like, to me, that was like, yeah, like my first little brownie point. And, you know, I was kind of proud of that, you know. And I landed in AdSeg, and, you know, AdSeg wasn't, nothing that was gonna scare me, you know what I mean? I had been slammed down before, so I knew what that was like, you know what I mean? And I knew how to adjust. And I think one of the most important things about me is that, I've always been resilient. I've always been a strong person. I could endure, you know what I mean? And, I could overcome. So I've always been resilient. Matter of fact, this is what I named this channel, Resilient Profiles, you know what I mean? And for me, it's about overcoming with strength. So yeah, like I've never feared, you know what I mean, ad seg. So yeah, I go to the hole, man, and I do a shoe term, and I get kicked out. But that wasn't my first shoe term, man. Unfortunately, in prison, I was able to conform to my environment because, like I said, I started to detach myself from the world. As a lifer, like in my mind, I put like, this is gonna be my life. I'm never gonna go home. This is my home. And I was conforming to life in prison. So I began to accept it. Keep in mind though, I had my girl, man. My girl was always in my corner. I had my mom too. I still had a few friends that I would be in contact with. But I had given up, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, my appeal, I had put in for my appeal, and my appeal got shut down. So, after your appeal gets shut down, you get a year to file for, this is at state level. So, at state level, during my appeal, you get a state-appointed appellate attorney, right? And they help you with your appeal all the way up to state level. After state level, if you get shut down and you don't get no action to go back to court, then you have a year to file in federal court. If you don't file within that year, then you forfeit your appeal. That's the ADEPA statute of limitations. If you don't file within that year, you pretty much truck your appeal. And being that I was law illiterate at the time, I didn't file after state level. So my appeal was done there. So at that point, I had come to accept that I was never going to come home. I had given up on myself. And that's one thing about my girl, man. Like, I always appreciate her because she never gave up on me. When I gave up on myself, she's the one that kept believing, like, you're going to come home one day. You're going to come home one day. These laws are going to change. And I didn't believe it. To me, like, I was a realist. To me, it was like, I'm never going to come home. Like, this is my reality. I accept it and I'm done and that's it, And that's another reason why I would get in trouble a lot. And I didn't care because there was no repercussions for me. There was no consequences. To me, the way I looked at things was like, what can you do to me that hasn't been done already? I already have a life sentence. What are you going to do? Give me another life sentence? Put me in jail? The most you could do is send me to ad seg. So that mentality allowed me not to fear consequences in jail. I didn't care about getting write-ups. I didn't care about, breaking rules. I didn't care about none of that because none of that affected me the way I seen it, or at least as far as I was concerned, And unfortunately, that attitude got me in trouble a lot, man. I ended up going to Corcoran SHU, man. I went to Corcoran SHU for a 24-month SHU term. And while I was there doing my 24-month SHU term, I caught another SHU term. And that's the one, where I mentioned earlier where I almost killed my cellie. So I don't want to go into too much details about that because that's a whole nother story. But I ended up being in solitary confinement, Corcoran SHU, 4A, 4 left, for 5 years. And my time in Corcoran SHU, man, was maybe the hardest time I had ever done in prison. Um, but it was also a blessing because I was able to really focus on myself, man. Like work on all my weaknesses, all my hangups and my character defects, and you know what I mean, turn them into strengths. You know what I mean? Like I try to rewire, you know what I mean, myself and make a better version of myself because man, the truth of the matter is, man, like I had been unhappy with myself and with my life and you know what I mean, the way I had become, you know what I mean? Um at that point, you know, I was like a pretty much like I was an animal, basically. Come on, I just had barely killed my Sally. Almost killed my Sally. I mean, you know, I was there already in a 24-month shoot term. Uh, I had that I didn't care mentality. You know, I didn't fear nothing. Like, you know what I mean? As far as consequences, like, but I was unhappy. So I used that time in Corcoran Shoot to educate myself, to reflect, to rewire myself, my way of thinking and everything, because I realized that my behavior is dictated by the way I think, by the way I feel. That influences the way I behave. So I realized that I got to change myself from the inside out. And so I started making little daily investments into myself just to become a better version of myself. I wanted to be a better person overall, man. And, you know, at this point, I was already getting a little older and I already had been in prison for at least a decade already. And so, you know, at that point, like, I don't know if maturity set in or if it was because I was in Corcoran Shoe or what, but I began to take on a paralegal course. I signed up for this 2-year paralegal course. It cost $800. It was a self-correspondence course, and my wife helped pay for it, and I learned about law. So I did that, and I started doing all these other little self-help course groups and shit, and eventually I started doing college. So what I did was during my time in Corcoran Shoe, I cultivated this discipline. I was working out every day, you know, I was reading, and then I was educating myself. That's when I did my paralegal courses. That's when I did, you know what I mean, my college and, you know, shit like that. Because the way I seen it was, I got to make myself a better version of me. I got to cultivate my weaknesses into strengths. I got to keep a strong mind, a strong body, you know, stay emotionally balanced. I mean, everything. You know, there was people in Corcoran Shoe that I had been there with for a while, and you start to see like the deterioration that solitude causes. You know, there's a word they use called sensory deprivation. There was people that had pulled up there that I had seen when they first got there, man, and you know, after 2-3 years, man, like they started losing their little marbles and shit, like, you know what I mean? And I remember telling myself, like, man, I refuse to be conquered. I'm not gonna be conquered mentally. I'm not gonna be conquered physically, and I'm not gonna be conquered emotionally. Like, I'm gonna fucking overcome. Like, you know what I mean? Whatever adversity comes my way, I'm gonna fucking take it head on, and I'm gonna fucking persevere. Like, so that's the tough attitude that I had adapted, but it created good discipline for me, you know? And at the same time, I was able to reflect and deal with a lot of my own personal hangups, you know what I mean? But during this time, a lot of things were happening in CDC. A lot of laws were like passing, and you know what I mean? The first law that passed that I was eligible for was SB 261, the Youth Defender Law, where if you committed your crime when you were 23 years and under, you're eligible to go to board after 25 years. So you could have 100 years to life, but after 25 years, you're eligible to go to board to get released. And the thing with that law is that you're considered youth offender. So when you go to board, the culpability is lesser, because the way they see it was your mind wasn't fully developed when you committed your crime. So therefore, you're less responsible, or you're held less responsible, versus an adult with a full functioning mental capability that committed a crime, and you being a young person with a still developing mind. So that law is based on that. And so I qualified for that law because I was 21, 22 when I committed my crime. So that was one of the laws that I had qualified for. And then second of all, another law passed, which was a 3 strikes law. I think, what was it, Prop 47 or Prop 46 or something like that. I mean, that one didn't really affect me. So fast forward a little bit, I get out of Corcoran SHU, and another law passed called Senate Bill 620. Senate Bill 620 was a gun enhancement law. So when I got sentenced, remember, I shot 2 people. So I had 19 years for 2 assault with firearms and shooting at an occupied vehicle. So basically what that means is I had 19 years with 85% for my crime. However, I had 25 years to life for the gun enhancement alone. So that's that law where it's 10 years if you use a gun, 20 if you discharge it, and 25 to life if they get injured as a result of you discharging that firearm. So I got 19 years for my crime, but I got 25 to life for the gun enhancement alone. So basically, I only had life for a gun enhancement. So Senate Bill 620 passed, and that eliminated mandatory gun enhancements and it returned the discretion back to the judge. So basically, when I got sentenced with that gun enhancement, it used to be a mandatory minimum. It was like one of them type of laws. It was like one of the harshest laws in the nation at the time. And the judge didn't have no discretion. Once you got hit with that law, because of the sentencing language, you had to be sentenced that way. So that's the reason why I caught life. When I got sentenced, my judge, I remember him telling me, because of this law, I have to sentence you this way. My hands are tied. Basically, his hands were tied because of that law. Well, anyway, 620, Senate Bill 620 changed all that. It returned the discretion back to the judge. So I filed a habeas corpus because remember, I became a paralegal. So I did my own research and everything. I filed for a Franklin hearing under the youth offender law. That was just an open loophole that allowed me to get back down to court. Then I filed for Senate Bill 620, the gun enhancement law. I remember being in prison and getting a letter saying that my case was assigned to some lawyer or whatever, a public defender at Compton Court. So I got a hold of this public defender and I had a court scheduled. And that's when I learned, like, oh shit, I'm getting pulled down to fucking back to court. And sure enough, man, like, I got pulled down back to court. And man, I started going to court and coronavirus hit. So the corona thing in the county was no joke. When I was in the county getting resentenced, I caught the coronavirus twice. And I remember thinking, like, man, oh great, like, fuck. Here I am, potentially gonna get released, might have one foot out the door, and fuck, the system's trying to fucking take me out. Like, they don't want me to get out of here alive and shit, you know? But that whole year passed, man, and eventually, like, I was in the county for like about almost 2 years, man, and I go to court, and I remember when I got resentenced, man, I remember my public defender telling me, like, look, I don't know what's gonna happen, but It's up in the air. I can't read the judge. I remember my mom, my wife, everybody being in court that day. My wife used to like not even like my judge because she thought he was like an asshole. What it really was, it was just that he was hard to read. But I got resentenced. Actually, like, I don't even want to go into the details just yet. I think I should say that for another story, like how I got resentenced and stuff. But to make a long story short, I got resentenced. I got my life sentence taken off. I got my gun enhancement dismissed. I got resentenced to my 19 years for my crime. At that time, I had been down 18 years, and I pretty much had time served, man. So yeah, I got resentenced, man. I had to go back upstate to do another whole year because remember I caught time in prison. And yeah, man, like fuck, I came home, and I posted some videos on this channel of the day I got released, the day I walked out of prison. A few hours later, I went to the beach and I jumped into the ocean. Man, that was fucking amazing. Like, you know, a free man. Like, I got baptized by the world again. That was so amazing. I got my life back, you know. It's, man, you know, I walk here now every day, man. The way I live my life out here, I live my life with gratitude, and I'm blessed. Because when I look at things, I wasn't even supposed to be out here. Like, I'm not supposed to be free right now. Like, every time, like, you know, people get mad while driving, and, you know what I mean, people cutting people off and rude. I'm just like, man, miss me with all that shit. Like, I'm just so fucking happy to be out here, man, you know? And I make the most of it, man. Like, you know, I've been out here. I work 2 jobs. I go to school. And I'm doing everything that I need to do. You know, I got my own place. I bought my own car. And I'm taking care of business, man. Because, you know, there's so many lifers in prison right now that wish they had this chance. So what would I look like? Coming out here fucking up and going back to that old shit again, only to land back in jail. You know how many people would be fucking pissed at me? Like, cause there's so many people that are lifers that wish they could be in my shoes. I don't take this second chance for granted. Look at my shirt. I love second chances, and I'm making the most of my second chance. So, I'm extremely blessed. I feel gratitude, and I'm doing what I need to do. But yeah, man, I'm gonna continue a little bit more with these stories and shit. I don't want to make this video too long. I want to go into more details about when I got resentenced and shit. So I'm gonna save this little story for my next video and shit. But yeah, man, I hope you guys liked a little bit of this video today. Just wanted to share a little bit and touch bases with you guys. So yeah, man, you know, hit that subscribe button, man. Hit that like and shit, man, and you know, give me some feedback. All right, fellas, you guys have a good day. Send my love to you guys. All right, peace.